Bosnian Serbs vote overwhelmingly to preserve a disputed national holiday, going against the country's top court. But are they, as some say, preparing to break away from the Federation of Bosnia-Herzegovina? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Unlawful and illegitimate. That's what critics are calling the Bosnian Serb referendum to preserve January the 9th as a national holiday. That's when, in 1992, Bosnian Serbs declared the creation of their own state, igniting a 3-year war that killed 100,000 people. Now, Bosnia's top court had ruled against the vote, saying the holiday discriminates against non-Serbs. But the Serb Republic president went ahead anyway. And there are those who see it as a challenge to the Dayton peace accord, which ended the war in 1995. Now, Dayton created a complex system of government that gives Bosnian Serbs some autonomy in the Republika Srpska. And it balances state power between Bosnia-Herzegovina's 3 main ethnic groups, the Catholic Croats, Orthodox Serbs and the Muslim Bosniaks. Now, Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik had been accused of threatening that agreement and of using the referendum to increase his party support ahead of local elections in less than a week from now. We'll get to our discussion in just a moment, but first, Emma Hayward has this report.
The president of Republika Srpska was among early voters. Milorad Dodik pushed hard for this referendum and was in a buoyant mood when he cast his vote and after the results had come in.
I'm so proud of the people of Republika Srpska, proud of all of those who voted today, and I have to say, shame on all those Serbs who didn't show up at the referendum. This was more than just spite, more than just a little hate. This was for the people. That's why I have to announce here that today's referendum was a success.
Bosnian Serbs were asked whether the 9th of January should be a public holiday for Republika Srpska, the autonomous entity within Bosnia and Herzegovina. About 1.25 million people are eligible to vote. Many in other parts of Bosnia would rather the referendum never happened. Judges in the highest court in Bosnia-Herzegovina say the proposed holiday discriminates against non-Serbs, including Bosniak Muslims and Catholic Croats. January the 9th has deep significance in the Balkans. Serbs declared their own self-governing region on January the 9th, 1992, which helped trigger the 3-year-long Bosnian War. The 9th of January is also a holiday for Orthodox Christians. Many see this as a test of strength for President Dodik. They also fear it could stoke tensions in a country still largely divided along ethnic lines. Western diplomats have warned that the referendum violates peace deals which ended the Bosnian War. The Russian government, though, has offered its support, and the vote went ahead regardless of the criticism.
We should fight for our rights and for our identity and to enable our young people to have a better future.
It's not important. We all know it's not important. The holiday will be celebrated on January 9th, with the referendum or without it. It appears to me to be a dress rehearsal. We all know that's the case.
If the Federation has a holiday on March 1st, why wouldn't we have one on the 9th of January?
There are further concerns that the referendum is a test before a vote in 2018 on whether Republika Srpska should separate completely from Bosnia, raising the prospect of further instability and suspicion across the Balkans. Emma Hayward, Al Jazeera.
Okay, let's introduce our guests now. In Berlin, we have Bodo from the Democratization Policy Council. In Sarajevo, we have Emir Suljagic, former Minister of Defence and a survivor of the Srebrenica massacre. in London. Joining us on Skype, we have Tim Judah, who's author of The Serbs, History, Myth and the Destruction of Yugoslavia. Welcome to you all. Can I start with you, Amir, in Sarajevo? Just holding this referendum went in defiance of the ruling by the Constitutional Court. How big a challenge is this to the institutions of the Federation?
There is a number of ways to look at this. I mean, on one level, the holding of this referendum means that the Dayton peace agreement, which was the basis for not only existing constitutional and political order in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but basis for peace, is now out of the window because our constitution is part of a of a peace agreement, one of the annexes of our peace agreement, and it's a package arrangement. And if you don't get to pick and choose which part of that arrangement you stick to and which one you don't, that's one thing. But from where I'm sitting, equally important and perhaps even more is the fact that Mr. Dodik has successfully, without firing a shot, inaugurated the right to referendum. For all those who know, and both Mr. Weber and Mr. Judah, they remember that throughout the conflict and throughout the negotiations to end the war in Bosnia, the then leadership of the Bosnian Serbs insisted and never got the right for Serbs to hold a referendum in Bosnia on their future after a number of years, and they never got that. They didn't get it when there were Yugoslav army troops on Mount Trebević just above Sarajevo. Now they managed to get that.
All right, let's take that point. Let's put that to Bodo in Berlin. So Amir is suggesting that this referendum, which is on something which is quite seemingly innocuous, a national holiday. Bodo is suggesting that this is the start of chipping away at Dayton, suggesting perhaps even Dayton has now been invalidated.
You see, Martine, we are now dealing with threats by Mr. Dodik on holding a referendum for almost more than a decade. Since he came to power in 2005 and since we had a shift in Western policy away from the Dayton instruments over to so-called transition to ownership, local ownership and responsibility, away from US leadership to EU leadership, we have this travail for a decade in which the EU and the US are struggling with this change of policy they have done. And on the other side, the threat by Mr. Dodik, who for a decade has built his political leadership and his political power of a de facto one-party system, the last one in the Balkans and half of Bosnia, based on, what was once the thing that Bosnia was created on in Dayton, that is, it's an undefined state. It's not like you've said in your intro, it's not a federation, it's neither a republic nor a federation, nor a confederation. It has remained undefined, and it has remained a dysfunctional state that by purpose was created as a dysfunctional state. And when we handed over local ownership in 2005 to the local elites, we handed over an unfinished business, a system that creates a basis for ruling on the basis of patronage. That means systemic corruption, and fear. That means permanent instigation of inter-ethnic fear. And we created that vacuum, and Mr. Dodik basically built his authority jumping into that vacuum, testing the red lines of the West, and the red lines he has very soon experienced have never been there. So he basically, moved the goalposts and basically, created for a kind of Machiavellian tactical politics.
All right, can I jump in there, Bodo? Before
rules-free environment.
Can I jump in there and ask Tim about, as I say, this referendum, which seems to have got many people very, very upset indeed. But surely if Mr. Dodik hadn't gone ahead with the referendum, he'd have lost credibility, and there are important elections coming up next week.
Yes, I think that's probably the main point. Is I think that he wanted to drum up support for his otherwise from his otherwise waning support base for the local elections which take place on October the 2nd. But I think that there is a certain amount of what one official, actually a Bosnian Serb official, said to me. He said there's an element of political ping pong in that it serves the ruling party or the leading Bosniak party of Mr. Izetbegovic as well as Mr. Dodik, because they can both play the sort of big hard man on their community, for their communities, and drum up support for the local elections. So I think it has served them both quite well.
All right, Amir, I see you not entirely agreeing with what Tim had to say. Does this audacious push by Mr. Dodik actually benefit, although inadvertently perhaps, benefit the other communities?
Well, as a matter of fact, I actually don't agree with the last part of Mr. Juda's statement. I mean, Mr. Izetbegovic has actually come across as very weak in this crisis, has been very actually very soft, for the lack of a better word. He has been prevaricating. He didn't know exactly what his course of action should have been. And this is a major strategic victory for Mr. Dodik, not only in terms of his short or the shortest term gain, which we're going to see in the elections. And I don't think that was the issue here. I think that Mr. Dodik's lead or his party's lead in the election was relatively safe, and he was going to win anyway. But this is also a long-term strategic shift and balance of power, and in the internal balance of power in Bosnia. And what a lot of people fail to see, from where I'm again, that's just my opinion, is that this is a unilateral, under-the-table revision of the Dayton Peace Accords, and that's what it's like. So no, I don't agree. I think Mr. Izetbegovic has actually, he would have preferred very much if the referendum didn't take place, because his agenda is something completely different now.
And Bodo.
And again, this is
okay.
this is coming from somebody who I have spent most of my political career in opposition to Mr. Izetbegovic.
All right. Bodo, does it necessarily follow then that the Bosnian Serbs, this is the first shot across the bows, if you like, towards eventually declaring secession away from Bosnia-Herzegovina? Is that inevitable?
You see, I think we had this discussion for the whole decade since Mr. Dodik has started to threaten, with such a referendum on secession. And, there were a lot of discussion, about, this is just a tactique, this is not serious, so we don't need to really pay attention. I mean, we even have proposal on this referendum, the EU and the US should just ignore it, because nothing would happen afterwards. That's not the point, The point is, if you have a regime that used a threat for a referendum for a decade, and this regime is more and more in a crisis, it's in an economic crisis because the corrupt way it functions, it's self-destructive, then, this kind of tactique can get out of control. And I mean, I think we already see this, because on the one side, we have allowed Mr. Dodik, the EU and the US, especially the EU, through its weakness and unwillingness to confront his politics, and in the name of fake stability to confront him. And we've compromised over his numerous different other below the level of a referendum actions, not only in words by deems, to usurp the competencies of state-level institutions and basically to destroy what we have created on independent judiciary and police on the state level to really turn Bosnia into a functioning state. So the problem here is, when we have somebody who uses as a Machiavellian tool a referendum, to stir up tensions, and when his regime gets into crisis, this can lead, to where, the situation getting out of control. And I think that exactly is what already happened here. By crossing this line, he has entered into a very uncharted territory. He has basically shown on the one side that judiciary and police isn't existing, though only on paper. They will not arrest him for, doing an unconstitutional move. The EU will not, introduce sanctions, though they could have done it. And on the other side, he has crossed the line, and he needs to, continue on that line to politically survive. Because,
Tim.
Now we have local elections. In 2 years, we have general elections, so the problem will remain.
All right, Tim. Is it unthinkable to even contemplate the possible secession of Republika Srpska from Bosnia-Herzegovina? What would happen if that was indeed placed on the table and indeed everyone agreed, certainly within Republika Srpska?
Well, if, as Mr. Dodik has said, that there's going to be a referendum in 2018, I think, first of all, it's very unlikely that that could take place peacefully, which I think also kind of militates against the fact that there might be one. I think it's very unlikely that it would take place peacefully. But even if it did, what would you have? You would have the equivalent of Abkhazia or South Ossetia on the River Drina. That's to say, making a comparison between the isolated and poor little enclaves which have broken away from Georgia, which only survive because they have Russian military support. Now, Russia supports the Republika Srpska, but it's a couple of thousand miles away. And I don't think that the Russians, for however much verbal support they give Mr. Dodik, are about to dispatch troops over NATO territory to a place which is surrounded by the EU and NATO to support the Bosnian Serbs. So I think that although I think Mr. Dodik is a gambler, and I don't disagree that this is a blow against Dayton, I think it would be very unlikely that he would gamble on a vote on secession, especially when Serbia would be against it, as Serbia was against this referendum, which is why he had to go to get extra support from Russia.
So, Amir, at this stage, how threatened would you say is this ill-defined entity that is Bosnia-Herzegovina? Bodo has pointed out that it's not a federation, but however you want to describe it, how much threat is there to the existence of Bosnia-Herzegovina right now?
Well, I'm usually counted among the hawks on the political scenery, on the political scene in this country. But as a matter of fact, I see this as a serious threat. I see this as almost existential threat to the existence of Bosnia-Herzegovina in her present borders. As I said, the holding of referendum has essentially annulled the effect. Any international agreement is worth only so much as the enforcement closure, as its enforcement mechanisms are worth. And Mr. Dodik has shown that there are no enforcement mechanisms when it comes to the Dayton Peace Agreement. So essentially the only reason we're not shooting at each other today is that there's still some reservations about what's the next thing that we have to do. Legally, we are back to the one day before the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement. This is where this country is now legally. Where we go from here, essentially, I don't know. I'm not in a position to say. I'm not in a position to make any decisions. I know how I would have acted, and I know how I would act. But that, again, that's not going to cut it.
All right, Bodo. Of course, the guarantors, the international guarantors who were appointed to oversee the implementation of Dayton, the UK, the US, the EU, Russia, among others, you would suggest, I'm guessing, that they have failed in their mandate.
Absolutely. You see, in 2006, the EU and the US together decided that all the reforms that had been done in the decade following the signing of the Dayton Peace Accord, and in reforming the state, stabilizing and strengthening the state, in democratic reforms, in rule of law reforms, have been sufficient, and the political elites are mature enough, to continue the reform process in the executive, non-enforcing international political environment of the EU integration policy process. And this has not happened, we had a decade of total blockage of the integration process, and what is even worse, Mr. Dodik has started and others of the political elites have joined in. They have unraveled, and we have blinked and backed down and turned a blind eye on, partly assisted because of political weakness, primarily the EU, in unraveling, these reforms and rolling them back and really, creating a dangerous, spiral in which we are now. I mean, we have seen, just to remind you, in 2014, we have seen violent social protests. My organization basically has warned that this can happen, the situation can deteriorate. We don't need to see a war, there are no armies anymore, but I mean, things are getting out of control, and when things are getting out of control and the regime really, at one point needs to implement a referendum it has threatened with for 10 years successfully and didn't need to to organize the referendum, then you know all kinds of political miscalculations can happen, especially when you have a political environment with no rules and an international community, a EU and the US, without any serious political wills to stop.
Let me jump in there, Tim. I'm just wondering about Serbian opinion, because Serbs often say that they are always viewed with a certain amount of scepticism, if not hostility. And I'm wondering how much truth there might be in that, and also whether Serbian opinion is of one. I mean, are they an amorphous mass, the Serbs of Bosnia-Herzegovina, all agreeing on the same thing, or is there light and shade? Are there differences?
Politically, there are certainly differences because you have one of the three presidents of Bosnia is from a party which is against Mr. Dodik, and although they went along with the referendum and because it was very difficult politically to go against it, certainly they would never have launched such a thing by themselves. I think that the fact is that although the headline figure is that 99.8% of people who voted in the referendum voted in favour of this measure, the fact is that only 55% or so actually turned out to vote, which is surprisingly low. I think that most Serbs in Bosnia think that if they would like to have their national day on January the 9th, that it's not for anybody else to tell them what to when they should hold it or when they cannot hold it. But I do think that most Bosnian Serbs, like most Bosniaks and most Croats in Bosnia, are more concerned about jobs, education and healthcare, and wish that their politicians would get down to dealing with those things rather than fanning nationalist flames.
So, Amir, should we just see this then, albeit this is a dangerous moment, should we just see this as a political ploy, if you like, to distract attention away from those pressing issues that Tim has just outlined? We've got very, very high unemployment, haven't we? We've got very low wages, among the lowest in Europe. So there is a great social crisis, isn't there, in Bosnia-Herzegovina?
Yes, and again, there may be up to a point and a little bit of that, but again, Mr. Dodik has a plan, and Mr. Dodik has broadcasted his plan pretty much to the entire world, and he's sticking to it, and he's going through his plan, and part of his plan was holding a referendum. I agree, you know, there is a social crisis, but who are the people who are voting people like Mr. Dodik into power? The very people that Mr. Juda is referring to, the very people with the very low wages who are concerned with getting jobs and so on and so forth. So how come such a people again and again choose people like Mr. Dodik to lead them? So it's really, it's really not about ordinary people. I mean, situations like this, processes like this are not about ordinary people. They're not about neighbors. People who live, neighbors, good or bad, do not make these decisions. These decisions are made by people who have the power, who control the institutions, and who use these institutions towards political goals. And Mr. Dodik's obvious and declared political goal is to secede by year 2018 or year 2020. But part of the process is to convince both the international community and other people, the rest of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that it can be done peacefully. And that's the most important thing, because it cannot be done peacefully, because nobody here is going to accept to have an international border of whatever entity 300 meters from the downtown Sarajevo.
Bodo, can I ask you to be very brief, because this is the last question, we've run out of time. Is there something that can be done to pull Bosnia-Herzegovina back from the brink?
You see, there's a lot that can be done. It needs a serious EU and US policy. Mr. Dodik is not the product of his citizens, He's the product of the West. He was made by the West and then left on his own. And I think you should also be understanding that these 55% are possibly manipulated, and given the fact that most people live on administrative jobs in the RS, this is not, an expression of the will citizens in the
I'm
eyes
afraid
who are desperate
I have to
because
jump
of
in
the
again,
economic situation.
Bodo. I'm so sorry, we have run out of time. But Bodo Weber, Emir Suljagic and Tim Judah, thank you all very much. And thank you for watching. You can see the programme anytime you like by going to the website aljazeera.com. For more discussion, there's our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. There's the Twitter sphere as well, our handle @AJ Inside Story. From me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.